Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2025 gangster film, The Alto Knights. The Alto Knights is a film that, in all honesty, probably would have been a lot better if it was made around the time that it was initially optioned. This is a movie that has been stuck in development hell for decades. I think the script was finalized and was being shopped around to different studios as far back as the 90s. Maybe it wasn't that far back, but it was definitely was the 2000s at the very least. And all the different major studios passed on it because they didn't think it was anything special. And after watching the movie, they were right. This really isn't anything that special when it comes to the gangster film genre. It doesn't really do anything that's that much new or that innovative other than having De Niro play two roles in the same movie. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on the film, though, I would like to give a special shout out to Shine for requesting this review. Now, The Alto Knights is a film directed by Barry Levinson. Now, Barry Levinson to me is a filmmaker who has a pretty strong track record. He has a lot of hit films on his resume, a lot of underrated gems, in my opinion, especially something along the lines of Toys with Robin Williams. And the last film that he did that I genuinely liked, though, was Bandits in the early 2000s. And ever since Bandits, it's just been a downward spiral for him. He's tried to do different things like The Bay, but it really wasn't any good. And to me personally, he's another director whose prime is long past, and he is just riding the coattails of his past success. And this film is no exception to that. He hadn't directed a film for, I think, at least 10 years prior to doing this. His last film that he did was Rock the Casbah, which was another pretty mid of the road, uh, mid tier, forgettable film. And you might think, okay, it's been 10 years. Maybe the time off enabled him to come back and have some fresh perspective on his direction, or he came up with some new tricks that he was able to utilize, or some other techniques that he was able to learn over this time. No, this isn't the case at all. In fact, the Alto Knights, directing wise, it's so average and so that if you didn't tell me that it was directed by Barry Levinson, there was no reason for me to assume that that was the case. Because the direction in this is every bit as mediocre and meh as pretty much any other director for hire that could have been nabbed to direct this movie. I think the only reason why he did this is so he got to work with De Niro again, because he really likes working with him, and I think they are also very close friends. So I think that's really the only reason why he did this, is so he could direct De Niro playing De Niro times two. And even with that added gimmick, or that added bit of a jolt for Levinson, it really doesn't show up on the screen. There are some moments visually where you see a little bit of that old Barry Levinson coming through with the framing or the shot selection, or with the way that he utilized some of the pans or the zooms. But a lot of the time, you just get some very tired, very bland direction. And you also get a lot of questionable decisions when it comes to the direction as well. The most questionable one of all to me is that there's a large chunk of this film that is an interview with an elder, Frank Costello, and it's shot in a way as if it's a documentary. And I don't understand that approach at all. This is not a pseudo documentary film by any means, but there are numerous shots in this where it looks like one. And that's just distracting. And it really is a very inconsistent visual tone. And it's not just that. When it comes to the scenes with Vito, which is De Niro under heavy prosthetics, way too often Levinson just deals with natural light. So it just exposes the fact that it's just De Niro under a bunch of makeup and it ruins the illusion. I don't know why he wasn't more aware of that. I don't know why he didn't decide to be more stylistic with it. And what's interesting is he started out kind of hiding him in the shadows, kind of obscuring things a little bit. But then there's numerous shots where he's shooting De Niro in natural light or in broad daylight under all of his makeup, and it's not really that convincing. So that's that's a detriment to the director. It really is. That is a director making that decision. I don't buy that it's the cinematographer. I don't buy that it's the set designer or the person who's setting up the lights. The director is the person who is responsible for a lot of that anyway. It's their vision, it's their mindset that's usually being followed throughout the production. And it's up to them to be like, hey, I don't want these scenes to look this way. I don't want to shoot in natural light. I don't want to have this makeup in broad daylight so it just looks like it's rubber. But no, that's not what happened. Maybe it's because Levinson doesn't really have a lot of experience with prosthetics. I think that might be the case, but he's such an experienced director that you would think that he would do his due diligence, so to speak, and do some research and learn how to shoot those scenes better. But apparently, he just felt like he knew enough, and that clearly was not the case when it comes to the final product. But yeah, the direction, it's just as middle of the road at the end of the day as pretty much everything else about the Alto Knights. The screenplay is by Nicholas Pileggi, and Nicholas Pileggi, he's the guy who wrote the book Wise Guy, which is the book that was the basis for the film Goodfellas. I think he also wrote the script for that film, and he's written some other gangster films as well. He was the screenwriter of Casino, and that's pretty much about where it ends for him. It seemed like he was definitely a one-trick pony. And he started off with his best script, which was based on a book he wrote, and then it was just uh, Casino and a whole lot of disappointing, just nowhere near as good efforts after that. I mean, he wrote the TV movie Kings of South Beach, which is entirely forgettable. He wrote City Hall, which is an okay thriller, but it's not what I would consider to be a gem. He also was the co-creator and executive producer on the show Vegas, which was very short-lived. And he was a producer on The Irishman, but he wasn't really involved that much when it comes to the script. And then he wrote the screenplay for this, and he's the guy who wrote the script that was going around and being passed around all these different studios for years and years and years, and the studios kept passing on it because they felt that it was generic and kind of been there, done that. And this film really is. Uh, It in my opinion, you easily could have just never even bothered with this movie and just made a documentary about Vito and Frank instead of having another just generic, very familiar gangster film, especially with a budget of 45 to $50 million. Warner Brothers really screwed up, if you ask me. Like they should not have even bothered with this, especially with a theatrical release. I mean, this movie was a big bomb this year. It only made $9.6 million in the box office. And the screenplay is definitely a big part of why this is such a generic and honestly kind of an off-brand gangster movie in a lot of ways. Like it feels like an off-brand The Irishman or some side story to Goodfellas or Casino, and it's not anywhere near as interesting or as compelling. I think a big part of why this is such a difficult film to really get into fully is because of the way the script is structured. It starts off in a very predictable fashion with Costello getting uh, shot at and surviving an attempted assassination, complete with narration from Costello talking about the events. And then it goes into flashbacks every now and then. But the flashbacks are rather boring and are mostly done through photographs, which makes it feel like it's a cheap movie. That's another reason why it feels like a knockoff of a gangster film, because they just use a lot of photographs for the flashbacks and Photoshop. Yeah, just a bunch of photoshopped photographs of Vito and Frank when they were younger. And there's even shots that are repeated throughout the film as well, which also adds to its cheapness. I don't know where the 45 to $50 million went when it comes to this film, because it does not really look like it costs that much to make it all. It looks like it cost half as much, if not even less. And the whole drama between Vito and Frank, like I don't really care. Like, why should I give a shit about a feud between two mob bosses? You know, one is a little more impulsive and is more violent and more vindictive than the other in Vito. But Frank is still a boss himself and is still shady and is still not what I would consider to be a good guy, despite eh, the fact that he definitely probably thinks of himself as one because of all the charity work that he did. Uh, but both of them are in my opinion, you know, scumbags. And unlike some of these other gangster movies, the actions that they do, the dialogue that they have, it's nowhere near as fun or as memorable as any of those other movies. Uh, because it's trying to be closer to reality, and but it's also trying to be a pseudo documentary in terms of the way that it's structured with these interviews with elderly Costello that are peppered in throughout most of the film. This is one of those things where you're like, I don't know exactly 100% what this film really wants to be. I don't know what its message is trying to be. I don't know what it's really trying to get across other than the story of these two bosses and what happened when Frank decided to frame Vito and put him away before he decided to retire himself. So in a lot of ways, it's like these two older bosses, and it's their last ride, so to speak. Their last series of gangster uh, uh, shenanigans isn't really the right word, but it's their last act as gangsters, as mob bosses, before either one of them winds up getting sent to jail for the rest of his life, or the other decides to retire and leave the mob game altogether. And it's trying to build suspense when it comes to Frank and Vito and the double crossing and all of that. But because of the fact that I never really liked either of these characters that strongly, there isn't much tension. And I will give the script some credit though for some things. I did like that you had an interesting dynamic between the two wives. That was honestly the most interesting thing of this script to me is Bobby Costello and her connection with her husband Frank, and the animosity that she has for Vito, and Vito's wife Anna, and the dynamic between her and Vito, and how Anna eventually decides to get a divorce from Vito, and it becomes this big court case, and she actually takes him to court for stealing money. And I like that Pileggi, he didn't hold back when it comes to just showing these characters and how petty they are and how genuinely over the top they can be when it comes to their interactions with each other. So that is definitely where I got the most enjoyment out of this movie, is like the battle between the wives, which is not what I expected out of this movie. Like, I thought I would be more interested in the battle between the two mob bosses, but that's not really how I ultimately felt about it, because there's barely that much of a difference between the two. They seem like pretty much the same guy, but one is more ruthless and vicious and violent than the other, and that's really about it. And the other one is just more behind the scenes. Like, Frank's the guy who will get stuff done and do his dirty work uh, behind the scenes, behind closed doors, with other people doing it for him. And Vito's the one who wants to get involved in the action himself. He's the one who wants to beat up on guys, wants to show that he's still got balls, stuff like that. And he's also a guy who'd been in prison for a long time, or he had been away in the war, and he's now back, and he wants his old turf back. He wants his old job back, and he's not getting that, and so he's frustrated, and he's trying to do what he can in order to weasel his way back to the top, and it pretty much ends in predictable fashion in that regard, where be careful what you wish for. He ultimately does get that opportunity, and then it ultimately is something that winds up screwing him in the end. There's a bunch of different other casting of characters too that are a focus off and on throughout the story. Different members of the Luciano crime family, or the Genovese crime family, or people who work for the government, or for the police, the FBI, who are doing investigations, and so on and so forth. It's also a film that for some reason is also a bit of a courtroom drama, which I don't really know if that really was a good fit either. It's just such a bizarre mishmash of varying genres when it comes to this story and this film. It wants to be a biopic, a gangster movie. It wants to be a courtroom drama. It wants to be a film about, I guess I would probably say or a revenge movie in some ways, because a lot of it is about Frank getting revenge on Vito for trying to kill him. But it's trying to be all these different things, and as a result, it's just never really any of those things with that much effectiveness, because it's trying to do too much. In a lot of ways, the Alto Knights is very much like a big plate of pasta, but there's just way too much on the plate. Like, there's too much pepper and oregano and other spices. There's not just meatballs, but there's all different types of sausages. There's some mushrooms in there. There's, four different types of cheeses. It's just too much. And as a result, it all blends together into something that just kind of tastes like nothing. Like, it doesn't taste like, you don't taste the individual ingredients. It just has this tasteless feel and overall vibe to it. It's just very bland. I keep I've said that numerous times when it comes to this film, but it really is something that exemplifies and represents the Alto Knights very well. It's a very bland film, and a big part of it is the script and the overall story. And yeah, I mean, there's a reason why it was passed on for many, many years. I mean, it was in the works apparently even earlier than the 80s. I mean, the 90s. It was actually in the works in the 70s. So even when the gangster films were starting to become more popular and more of them were getting made, and studios were looking for any reason whatsoever to greenlight the next Godfather, this script still wasn't getting picked up. That says volumes to me. Now, when it comes to the cast, it's not too bad, but the gimmick casting of De Niro playing Frank and Vito was a mistake. I really like De Niro. I think he's a great actor. And he does a decent job playing both roles. But honestly, I think this film and the overall performance of the cast in general would have been a lot better if it was some other actor playing Vito. If De Niro just focused on playing Frank, being the film's narrator, and really telling the story from his perspective, and then having a different actor play Vito, because it was just too much of a distraction to me. And the performance wasn't really impressive enough when it comes to him playing both roles to really make it feel like the gimmick or the risk was worth taking or worth doing in the first place. It just felt like it could have been another cost saving measure. Even though this costs like 45 to 50 million dollars, like, why do you need to cut costs by having De Niro play two roles? Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. I really would like to know where all this money was allocated to. Did a good chunk of the budget just go straight to the mob? Is that why? Was this just a mob funded movie where the mob laundered some money through this film? Is that what happened with this? It's like, oh, we don't really want to spend that much. Just have De Niro play two roles, and then we'll just launder the rest, and it'll be good. It'll be fine. Like, I don't get it. The cast is also in some ways a Sopranos reunion, which is kind of fun in its own way. I mean, you have multiple different actors and actresses from The Sopranos in this. You have Kathrine Narducci, who was Charmaine in the show. You have Michael Rispoli, who was Jackie. You have Louis Mastillo, who was Sal. So you have like a decent number of actors who played Sopranos characters. You also have Debra Messing, who plays Bobby Costello, Frank's wife, and this is honestly, in my opinion, probably the best performance out of the entire movie. And I never thought I would say that when it comes to a film that has Robert De Niro in the cast, but I honestly feel that way. Like she was really good in this as Bobby, Frank's wife. She did such a good job embodying and becoming this character that I didn't even see Deborah Messing in the role. I didn't even see the actress. I just saw the character that she was playing because she did such an authentic and genuinely amazing job playing her. Um, De Niro, though, I definitely saw just De Niro just being De Niro. Like, there's not really a lot about his performance in this other than him playing two roles that is really that different than what you've seen him do before. And it's kind of the same for Kathrine Narducci, who plays Anna, but she has that fire to her that's always fun to watch. And it's still the case here, especially when she's chewing out Vito in the middle of the courtroom. Uh, Michael Rispoli is Albert. He had, in my opinion, another strong performance here as the close ally of Frank, Albert. Um, and the rest of the supporting cast is fine too. Michael Adler, who played Toby, the senator on the committee. Ed Amatudo plays Rudolph Halley. Joe Pacino is Joe Profaci. James Ciccione is Carlo Gambino. Anthony J. Gallo is Tommy Lucchesi. Wallace Langham is Estes Koffer. Belmont Camelli is Frankie Boy. Louis Mastillo, Sal is Joseph Bonanno. Um, Robert Uricola, who plays Tony. Tony Bender Strollo, who actually no, that was the I'm looking at Wikipedia. I was like, wait, Robert Uricola was actually a real gangster? No, that's the Wikipedia article for Tony, Anthony Tony Bender Strollo, the character that he played. Um Matt Servito is George Wolfe, Frank's personal attorney. He's another Sopranos guy. Like he was one of the FBI agents in the Sopranos. So yeah, there's like I think there's like at least 3 or 4 Sopranos actors in this. So if you're like a fan of the Sopranos, you want to see some more of the Sopranos cast, do some extra work in a mob capacity, then there's something you can get out of the Alto Knights in that regard. I still don't think the cast is like phenomenal or top notch or anything, but it's not too bad. And the cinematography by Dante Spinati, I would say, honestly, was great. I thought it was a really nice looking movie. I felt the direction at points was a little too flat, a little too uneven by Levinson, but it still looked really good when it comes to the shots, when it comes to the lighting. There's one shot in particular when uh, Frank gets assassinated. Like the assassination attempt happens, and he's in the elevator, and there's a shot that showcases like the blood on the mirror that I thought was handled really well. And there's some other shots that I definitely felt featured some nice cinematography in them too. The editing by Delgos Christ, it's not too bad. Um, the guy's definitely come a long way from being an assistant editor for Leprechaun 2. That's all I have to say. But I wouldn't say that the editing was like excellent or on another level, but it was another aspect of the film that was fine. The music by David Fleming, I didn't think it was anything that special. It just sounded kind of generic and plain. And the pacing of the film, it's kind of slow because of the fact that you really don't get involved that much in the story or the plot, because it just feels like, okay, we've been down this road before with a gangster movie, with a mob film. Oh, you have a mob guy and he one of his friends comes back and he wants power, and he ultimately turns against his friend, and then it starts a bit of a mob war. Like, that's an old hat when it comes to this genre of storytelling. And other than the gimmick of De Niro playing two roles in the same film, there's really not much that the Alto Knights provides that is anything really that new or that fresh. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on the Alto Knights. I would say, unless you're like a diehard De Niro fan, I don't think there's a lot here. So I think it's one you could definitely skip. But yeah, as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. See ya.